I didn't know my life was already over the night my marriage officially ended. There were no screaming matches, no shattered plates, no neighbors pressing their ears against walls, just paperwork, silence, and the slow, surgical precision of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. This happened about 8 months ago. I can finally talk about it now without my hands shaking, but that doesn't mean it hurts any less. It just means I've learned how to sit with the damage. My name is Jessica Bradford. I'm 33 years old, or at least that's who I used to be, before everything I thought I owned, loved, and understood was quietly removed from my life. I was married to Benjamin Carroll for nearly 10 years. Benjamin wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't the kind of man who slammed doors or raised his voice. He built things, real things, buildings that stood, contracts that held, systems that didn't fail under pressure. He worked in construction management and infrastructure development, the kind of work where mistakes collapse lives, not just spreadsheets. I used to think that meant he was boring. Worse, I thought it meant he was weak. I was catastrophically wrong. Our marriage didn't end the way people expect marriages to end. It ended the way buildings are condemned, quietly, officially, with every exit planned, long before anyone notices the cracks. The moment it truly began wasn't when I cheated. It wasn't when I reconnected with my college ex at a corporate summit. It wasn't even when I told my husband, casually, cruelly, that another man paid attention to me in ways he didn't. It ended the night Benjamin looked at me across our kitchen table and chose not to fight. No anger, no accusations, just a stillness so complete it should have terrified me. Instead, I smirked. I thought he'd leave for a few days. I thought he'd come back angry, broken, ready to beg. That's how these stories usually go. But Benjamin didn't disappear. He closed me. Over the next few weeks, my job unraveled. My money vanished. My apartment was reclaimed. Properties I thought were mine never legally were. Accounts I'd signed off on, without reading, had already been emptied with my own permission. Every asset, every protection, every legal tie between us, gone. And I didn't see any of it coming, because by the time I realized what was happening, I was already standing inside a structure he had finished demolishing. I laughed at my husband for being boring. I didn't realize I was mocking an architect while he was designing my erasure. Before everything collapsed, my life looked enviably stable from the outside. I was 33, working in corporate finance at a respected regional investment firm downtown. The kind of place with glass conference rooms, quiet authority, and senior partners who spoke softly because they didn't need to prove anything. I had a clear career trajectory, a reliable income, and a reputation for being sharp, ambitious, and dependable. At least, that's how I saw myself. Benjamin and I met almost 10 years earlier, right after graduate school. I was newly hired, full of energy, chasing momentum. He was already established in construction management, working on large-scale infrastructure projects, some tied to military subcontractors. Even back then, he moved differently from other men. Where others talked, Benjamin listened. Where others reacted, he calculated. On our first date, I remember thinking he was underwhelming. No grand gestures, no dramatic stories. He asked thoughtful questions, paid attention, and didn't try to impress me. He showed up on time. He followed through. He didn't play games. I mistook stability for a lack of passion. We moved in together after a year, married 2 years later in a tasteful, efficient ceremony. No drama, no excess. Benjamin handled most of the logistics. Contracts, payments, planning. I let him. I liked not having to think about those things. "You're good at this," I told him once, waving at a stack of documents on our dining table. He smiled slightly. "Someone has to be." Our marriage settled into a rhythm that felt predictable. Benjamin worked long hours but came home when he said he would. He organized the garage, updated household spreadsheets, planned maintenance schedules. His idea of excitement was optimizing storage or adjusting long-term projections. I found it suffocating. I wanted intensity, attention, to feel chosen in loud, undeniable ways. Instead, I got quiet dinners and practical conversations about load-bearing structures and escrow timelines. When friends asked what Benjamin was like, I joked, "It's like being married to a polite engineer who occasionally remembers to ask how my day went." They laughed. I laughed too, but something in me was already restless. Benjamin never accused me of anything, never demanded more. He trusted completely. and I wore that trust like it was invisible. I started staying later at work, then, coming home distracted, I scrolled on my phone during dinner, half listened when he spoke. I didn't notice when he stopped asking questions about my schedule, didn't register that he stopped reacting to my distance. I thought he was checking out. What I didn't understand was this: Benjamin didn't withdraw when something mattered. He observed. The cracks widened when I attended a corporate wellness leadership summit in Palm Springs, a company-sponsored event filled with networking sessions by the pool and mandatory team-building exercises disguised as self-care. That's where I ran into Adrian, my ex from college, the man I'd dated seriously for 2 years before life pulled us in different directions. He looked effortless, confident, attentive. When he spoke to me, he looked directly at my face, like my words mattered. We had drinks that first night at the hotel bar, laughed about professors we'd hated, shared stories about where life had taken us. It felt easy, in a way my marriage hadn't felt in years. By the second night, boundaries blurred. By the third, they were gone. I told myself it wasn't serious, just nostalgia, just a moment of feeling seen again. I didn't think of it as betrayal. I thought of it as relief. And while I was convincing myself that I deserved more than quiet stability, Benjamin was already noticing the silence I left behind. I just didn't know it yet. The affair didn't explode into my life all at once. It seeped in quietly, like moisture behind walls, weakening everything while the structure still looked intact. After Palm Springs, Adrian and I kept in touch. At first it was harmless messages, a check-in here, a joke there. Then the conversation stretched longer, more personal, more intimate. He remembered details: what kind of wine I liked, how I took my coffee, the frustrations I never said out loud at home. With Benjamin, everything felt functional. With Adrian, everything felt noticed. That difference became addictive. Adrian worked as a senior consultant for a tech solutions firm that occasionally partnered with my company. That should have stopped me immediately. Conflict of interest rules, ethics policies, compliance disclosures. I knew all of that. But I wasn't thinking like a finance professional. I was thinking like a woman who wanted to feel wanted. I told myself it was temporary, that I could manage it, that nothing would overlap. I was wrong on every count. The messages turned into meetings. The meetings turned into nights. And soon I found myself needing a space that wasn't my home. That's when the Vero apartment entered the picture. It was a luxury high-rise downtown, marble lobby, floor-to-ceiling windows, a doorman who barely acknowledged you. I framed it as practical. I'll be working late more often, I told Benjamin. Commuting back and forth doesn't make sense. He didn't argue. He nodded once. Do you want help setting it up? Setting it up how? Lease paperwork, utilities, payments. I waved him off, distracted. If you don't mind. I thought he was being supportive. Now I know he was being thorough. I started spending more nights in the city. Told Benjamin it was work. Told myself it wasn't lying, just editing the truth. He stopped asking questions, stopped seeming concerned, stopped reacting at all. I took that as indifference. I didn't realize it was restraint. My friends noticed the change before I did. Monica asked once carefully, "Are you and Ben okay?" I laughed it off. "He's fine, he's just boring." The word slipped out too easily. At home, the atmosphere thickened. Dinners grew shorter. Conversations felt forced. Benjamin still did the things he always had. Paid bills, maintained schedules, planned long-term. But emotionally, there was distance. I thought that meant he didn't care. What I didn't understand was that Benjamin didn't chase clarity. He waited for confirmation. And I gave it to him without realizing it over and over again. I scrolled through my phone during meals, texted Adrian while Benjamin spoke, missed anniversaries emotionally, if not technically. Benjamin never confronted me. He just watched. January turned into February, February into March. The weight of my double life grew heavier, but instead of feeling guilt, I felt justified. I told myself Benjamin had checked out first, that I was responding, not initiating. I told myself a lot of things. The truth was simpler. I believed my marriage was too stable to collapse. I believed Benjamin would never do anything drastic. I believed I was in control. The night everything broke, we'd just finished another dinner of cold chicken and colder silence. The kind where you realize you've become strangers sharing a kitchen. Benjamin looked at me and said quietly, "Do you want to go out tonight? Maybe a drink, a movie, something?" I barely looked up from my phone. And then I said it. The sentence that split my life in two. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even sound angry. That's what makes it so unforgivable. I looked up from my phone, Adrian's name still glowing on the screen, and met my husband's eyes across our kitchen table. "Not tonight," I said. Then, with a careless shrug, I added, "You know, Adrian actually remembers what I like. He pays attention." The words landed between us, soft and deadly. For a split second, I felt a flicker of something. Regret, maybe, or anticipation. I wanted a reaction, an argument. Proof that Benjamin still cared enough to fight for me. What I got was far worse. Benjamin froze. His fork hovered halfway to his mouth, completely still. His expression didn't change. Not anger, not shock. Just distance. As if he were looking at someone he didn't recognize standing in his kitchen, wearing his wife's face. The silence stretched. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of the clock on the wall, my own heartbeat, suddenly too loud. He didn't ask who Adrian was, didn't accuse me of cheating, didn't demand an explanation. After what felt like an eternity, Benjamin set his fork down with deliberate care. He stood up, pushed his chair in, and walked down the hallway toward our bedroom. I crossed my arms, leaning back in my chair, a smug half-smile tugging at my mouth. There it is, I thought, the drama. I followed him, still expecting raised voices or slammed doors. Instead, I watched him open the closet and pull out an old leather duffel bag from the back, the one he hadn't used in years. He packed methodically. Not frantic, not emotional, just enough clothes to make one thing clear. This wasn't a tantrum. This was a departure. "Seriously?" I said, scoffing, "you're leaving over a comment?" He didn't answer. He zipped the bag, then moved toward the bookshelf in our bedroom, the one I'd never paid much attention to. I watched as he slid it aside, revealing the small safe hidden behind it. I'd never learned the combination. Financial things were his domain. I never thought I needed to. Benjamin opened the safe and removed a thick black fireproof folder. It looked heavy, important. "What's that?" I asked, irritation creeping into my voice. He closed the safe, slung the duffel bag over his shoulder, and finally looked at me. "Not tonight." He used my words, gave them back to me, clean and sharp. Then he walked past me, down the hall, and out the front door. No slamming, no shouting, no final speech. Just silence. I stood there for a long moment, arms still crossed, heart oddly calm. Part of me believed this was a performance, a few days of distance, a dramatic gesture that would end with apologies and reconciliation. That's how these stories usually go. I poured myself a glass of wine and told myself he'd be back within a week. He never called that night, not the next morning, not the day after that. No angry texts, no demands for answers, no late-night voicemails. It was like he'd evaporated, and I had no idea that while I waited for him to come back, everything I thought I owned was already being dismantled. At first, I wasn't scared. I was offended. Offended that Benjamin had the audacity to leave without a fight. Offended that he hadn't begged, hadn't demanded explanations, hadn't shown the kind of emotional devastation I thought I deserved to witness. I told myself he was sulking somewhere cheap, some anonymous motel, eating takeout, replaying my words in his head, and regretting every step he'd taken. That illusion lasted about 24 hours. By the second night, the silence felt different. He hadn't blocked me, but my calls went straight to voicemail. My texts showed delivered, never read. No reaction, no acknowledgement. It was like trying to reach someone who no longer existed. I poured myself wine and paced the living room, alternating between irritation and unease. I told myself I was free now, that this was what I wanted: space, independence, relief from monotony. But when I crawled into bed alone, the emptiness felt heavier than I expected. The next evening, Monica came over with a bottle of red wine. She hugged me tightly, held on a little too long. "He'll cool off," I said breezily. "This is just his way of being dramatic." Monica didn't laugh. She sat on the edge of my couch, fingers wrapped tightly around her glass, knuckles pale. She kept glancing toward the hallway, like she expected Benjamin to walk back in at any moment. "Jessica," she said carefully, "you don't understand the kind of man Benjamin is." I rolled my eyes. "He builds spreadsheets, Mon. I think I understand him." "No," she said quietly, "he builds structures." She told me about the patio he'd built in her backyard years earlier, how he'd arrived with a full blueprint, how he hadn't explained much, just worked, and when he finished, it was perfect, permanent, solid in ways you don't notice until years later. "Benjamin doesn't argue," she said. "He plans." I waved her off, laughing. "You make him sound like a supervillain." Monica didn't smile. When Benjamin decides something is unsound, she continued, he doesn't patch it. He dismantles it properly, safely, so it never collapses on him later. The words unsettled me, but pride won. He'll be back, I insisted. He always is. Monica shook her head slowly, her eyes sad. I don't think he's coming back this time. She left early that night. 5 days after Benjamin walked out, the first crack appeared. I was at work when an email hit my inbox. Urgent, stamped in red, receipt requested. It was from compliance. They wanted to meet about discrepancies in my expense reports from the Palm Springs conference. My stomach dropped. The meeting was scheduled for the following morning. I told myself it was nothing, a paperwork error, a misunderstanding. But when I walked into that conference room and saw the HR director and compliance officer waiting, faces carefully neutral, I knew something was wrong. Very wrong. They had documents printed out, screenshots, booking confirmations. My name, Adrian's name, the same hotel room. One of them slid a paper toward me. Can you explain why a vendor contact was registered as a guest on your company-expensed hotel room? I opened my mouth and realized I didn't have a believable answer. As they spoke about conflict of interest policies and ethics violations, one word echoed in my head over and over. Procedural. This wasn't personal, this was systematic. And for the first time since Benjamin left, I felt something crack open inside me. Not anger. Fear. Because suddenly, I wasn't waiting for him to come back anymore. I was starting to realize he hadn't walked out in anger. He'd walked out with a plan. Once compliance started pulling at the thread, everything unraveled faster than I could keep up with. The meeting that morning wasn't about clarification. It was an audit. They had everything. Screenshots of booking confirmations, vendor invoices marked complimentary, internal emails forwarded through the ethics portal with meticulous formatting. Someone had taken the time to assemble the report carefully, professionally, the way an attorney prepares a case. I sat there, palms damp against the conference table, listening as the compliance officer explained that I had failed to disclose a personal relationship with a vendor contact connected to accounts I oversaw. That alone constituted a breach. Intent didn't matter. Outcomes didn't matter. Appearance of impropriety is itself a violation, he said politely. Procedural. By the end of the meeting, I was removed from all client-facing responsibilities. My vendor access was suspended. I was reassigned to a back-office role pending review. I walked out of that room feeling like everyone in the building could see it written across my face. Problem. Within days, the office atmosphere shifted. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. Colleagues avoided eye contact. People who'd once asked for my opinion now whispered behind their hands. I tried calling Benjamin. Straight to voicemail. I left messages measured at first, then sharper, then desperate. Nothing. I tracked down Jennifer, Benjamin's former assistant, hoping she might know where he was staying. She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. He's in Colorado, she said finally. Meetings. Something about Evergreen Holdings. Escrow reviews. Evergreen. The word hit me like vertigo. Evergreen was the LLC listed on the paperwork for the Aspen condo, the mountain place I'd always called my retreat. The one Benjamin had helped me find, decorate, and furnish 2 years earlier. The place I'd shown off on social media. The place I'd taken Adrian to for a winter weekend when I told Benjamin I was at a conference. I called the property management company immediately. There was a pause when I gave the unit number, a long one. Then the woman on the line said carefully, I'm sorry, Ms. Bradford, but I'm not authorized to discuss this property with you. All communications are routed through Evergreen Holdings legal counsel. I'm the owner, I snapped. My name should be on everything. Another pause. Your name is listed as a non-controlling member, she said gently. The sole authorized party is Mr. Benjamin Carroll. I hung up and sat there numb. I dug through old emails, searching for anything related to Evergreen. I found them. Forwarded documents from Benjamin with subject lines like tax structuring and LLC updates. I remembered signing them over breakfast while scrolling through my phone. Just initial here, he'd said casually. I never read a word. The condo was never mine. Benjamin had let me believe it was. That same week, my debit card declined at the grocery store, then another card, then another. Panicking, I tried to log into our joint account, over $120,000 in liquid assets. Access denied. The bank confirmed the account had been formally closed 6 days earlier, with signatures from both parties. March 11th. The Saturday Benjamin had taken me to a tax office downtown. I remembered signing papers while texting Adrian, annoyed at wasting my morning. I had signed away everything myself. By the time I understood what was happening, it wasn't just escalating. It was cascading. Assets. properties, accounts. Each discovery worse than the last. And Benjamin was nowhere to be found because he didn't need to be. He had already set everything in motion. Rock bottom didn't arrive with drama, it arrived with receipts. Over the next week, reality kept peeling itself back, layer by layer, until there was nowhere left to hide. I discovered that the rental properties Benjamin and I had built together over the years were already gone, sold months earlier, quietly, efficiently, transferred to shell companies registered in Delaware and Nevada, states Benjamin favored because, as he once joked, they don't ask questions. When I dug deeper, my breath caught in my throat. Every one of those companies traced back to him. He hadn't sold our properties to strangers, he'd sold them to himself. The beach condo we spent weekends at, the one where I hosted friends, drank wine on the balcony, and talked about our future, was held in a trust where Benjamin was the controlling trustee. I was listed only as a beneficiary. No authority, no decision-making power, no leverage. I controlled nothing. I collapsed onto the floor of my living room that night, surrounded by open laptops and printed documents, my chest tight, breathing shallow. Every signature on those pages was mine. My handwriting, my initials, my consent. I'd been so proud of not caring about financial details. Now that indifference was strangling me. The final blow came when I returned to the Vero apartment after another humiliating day at work, only to find an eviction notice taped to the door. Red letters, immediate vacancy. I fumbled with my keys. The deadbolt wouldn't budge. When the door finally opened, it wasn't Adrian on the other side. It was a man in a mover's uniform. "Jessica?" he asked. I pushed past him into chaos. Boxes half packed. My clothes folded like someone else's problem. Toiletries tossed into plastic bins. The leasing agent stood in the living room, clipboard in hand, wearing a smile that felt rehearsed. She explained that the leaseholder, Kix Holdings LLC, had initiated a clawback on all prepaid funds. Because the lease was under their name, the building was legally required to process vacancy. I stared at her, not understanding. "You're listed as an occupant," she said slowly, "not the tenant of record." Delaware. Again. I left with one suitcase and nowhere to go. That night, Monica showed up unannounced, pale and shaking, carrying a thick manila folder. She dropped it on my kitchen table like it weighed 100 pounds. "You think he just left," she whispered. "He didn't leave, Jess. He dissolved you." Inside were documents. Medical directives removing me as emergency contact. Estate plans revoking my beneficiary status. Insurance policies. Trust amendments. Every system where my name had once existed next to his. Erased. I wasn't his wife anywhere that mattered. Then, in the middle of a sleepless night, I found the voice memo. A drunken recording I'd made months earlier, laughing about keeping Adrian on the side. Benjamin's tired voice in the background, asking if I even wanted the marriage anymore. My laughter sounded cruel now, weaponized. The metadata showed it had been downloaded 3 days after I mentioned Adrian to his face. Evidence. I finally emailed Benjamin. Desperate, rambling, begging for a conversation. The reply came from his attorney. Subject line, closure. Attached was an 88-page audit detailing the complete dissolution of our shared life. Every asset accounted for. Every tie severed. No disputes. No ambiguity. The last line read, "Mr. Carriel considers all personal and legal chapters with you closed." I sat in the dark, wrapped in one of his old hoodies, realizing the truth. Benjamin hadn't punished me. He had finished me. And just when I thought I couldn't sink any lower, the worst was still waiting. I thought I had already lost everything. My marriage, my career, my home, my financial security. I thought the worst thing Benjamin could do was erase me quietly and walk away untouched. I was wrong. The real turning point came a week later, when Monica returned, this time without wine, without preamble, without any attempt to soften the blow. She was shaking. Not crying, not panicked. Shaken in the way people are when they've seen something that permanently alters how they understand another human being. She dropped a folded newspaper onto my coffee table. "Read it," she said. The headline was bold, keen, almost celebratory. Local development executive donates $320 million property to Women's Legal Advocacy Center. There was a photo beneath it, ribbon-cutting ceremony, city officials, smiling advocates, and standing slightly behind them, not posing, not smiling, hands folded calmly in front of him. Benjamin, composed, controlled, untouched. The article explained the donation in glowing terms. A state-of-the-art facility. Legal support for women exiting high-conflict relationships. Emergency housing. financial literacy programs. Then my eyes caught the paragraph that made my vision blur. The donation had been executed through a private trust containing a behavioral infidelity clause. When specific conditions were violated, conditions explicitly tied to marital fidelity, the asset automatically defaulted to charitable ownership. The article quoted legal experts calling it a landmark case in private trust enforcement. And then, my name, not as a donor, not as a partner, as the trigger. According to internal documentation, the clause was activated following verified infidelity by Jessica Bradford. My stomach dropped. Benjamin hadn't just protected himself. He had designed the consequences years in advance. That building didn't exist because of generosity. It existed because of me. My betrayal had been written into the foundation, quietly, legally, permanently. Monica whispered, "He didn't expose you. He didn't shame you. He didn't fight you. He used you." And suddenly everything clicked. Benjamin hadn't reacted emotionally that night in the kitchen because he didn't need to. He already knew where every pressure point was. He already knew which documents I'd signed without reading, which systems I'd ignored, which safeguards I thought were boring. He didn't raise his voice because he never lost control. The realization hit me with terrifying clarity. I had never been smarter than him. I had only been louder. For the first time in months, something inside me stopped breaking and started settling. I couldn't undo what I'd done. I couldn't recover what I'd lost. I couldn't fight him in court, even if I wanted to. But I could finally see the truth. Benjamin didn't destroy me out of rage. He exited with intention. And for the first time since this began, I understood my position clearly. I wasn't the victim of a cruel man. I was the consequence of my own carelessness, standing inside a system I'd never bothered to understand. That understanding didn't free me, but it grounded me. And from that ground, something unexpected began to grow. Acceptance. The fallout didn't come with confrontation. There was no final argument, no courtroom showdown, no public humiliation campaign. Benjamin didn't need any of that. The truth did the work for him. Over the following weeks, I watched the consequences ripple outward, quietly, efficiently, just like everything else he touched. At work, the internal review concluded exactly the way I feared it would. My reassignment became termination. No malice, no drama, just policy. "Your actions created unacceptable exposure," the HR director said, her tone almost apologetic. "This is a professional decision." Procedural. My name became something people didn't say aloud. Recruiters stopped returning calls. Former colleagues distanced themselves, not out of cruelty, but caution. I wasn't radioactive because I was evil. I was a liability. Adrian vanished without explanation. No goodbye, no apology. Once the compliance inquiry surfaced, he stopped answering messages altogether. The man who once made me feel seen disappeared the moment visibility became dangerous. I never heard from him again. Benjamin's world, meanwhile, continued without disturbance. The donation article circulated quietly in industry circles, not as gossip, but admiration. Legal professionals praised the trust structure. Charitable boards applauded the foresight. His reputation didn't suffer. If anything, it sharpened. Even his family, people who'd once welcomed me into holidays and gatherings, stopped reaching out, not with anger, with distance. I understood later that Benjamin hadn't poisoned them against me. He'd simply explained. Facts, documentation, timelines. There was nothing to argue with. And then, nothing left to discuss. I moved into a cramped studio apartment I could barely afford on my reduced income from a temporary position I eventually secured. It was quiet, bare. Nothing like the life I'd once curated so carefully for appearances. Some nights I stared at the walls and replayed moments I'd dismissed. The mornings I'd signed documents without reading. The jokes I'd made about his seriousness. The pride I took in not caring about boring details. I didn't hate Benjamin. That surprised me. I didn't love him either, not anymore. What I felt was something heavier and harder to escape. Understanding. Benjamin hadn't punished me out of spite. He hadn't tried to ruin me publicly. He didn't need to. He'd simply withdrawn every structure that had supported me and let gravity do the rest. And when I finally accepted that, something shifted. I stopped checking my email obsessively. Stopped hoping for a message that would never come. Stopped imagining explanations that wouldn't change anything. I let the silence settle. Because the truth was unavoidable. The man I thought was passive had been decisive all along. And the woman I thought was clever had been careless. The fallout was complete. All that remained was the aftermath, and the woman I would become inside it. It's been months now. I live in a studio apartment with thin walls and a window that barely catches the afternoon light. I work a job that doesn't impress anyone at dinner parties, but it pays the rent, and for now, that's enough. Some mornings I still wake up disoriented, reaching for a life that no longer exists. But most days I wake up clear. Clear about what happened, clear about my role in it, clear about the woman I was, and the one I'm becoming. Benjamin never contacted me again. Not to gloat, not to explain, not to punish. He didn't need closure. He had already built it. For a long time, I told myself I was the victim of a cruel, calculating man. That narrative was easier to live with. It softened the edges of my own responsibility. But the truth, the one I finally learned to sit with, is this. Benjamin didn't take advantage of me. I handed him every tool. I didn't lose my marriage because I cheated. I lost it because I dismissed trust as something that would always wait for me. I mistook silence for weakness, structure for control, stability for indifference. I believed love meant excitement. I didn't understand that sometimes love looks like quiet systems working perfectly in the background until you stop respecting them. There's a women's legal advocacy center downtown now. I've seen it from the outside. Brick, glass, solid, permanent. People walk in and out every day seeking help, protection, clarity. My name is buried in its foundation, not carved in praise, but etched as consequence. That knowledge used to haunt me. Now it reminds me. You don't lose everything all at once. You lose it in signatures you don't read, in boundaries you don't respect, in people you underestimate. And sometimes the most devastating revenge isn't loud or violent or emotional. It's architectural. It's a man who understands how to build things that don't collapse under pressure and applies that knowledge to walking away from you forever. I learned that lesson too late. But I learned it, and that has to be enough.